So glad you could be with us. Hello, Canucks fans. Welcome back to the episode of Canucks Conversation brought to you by Bet365. My name is Dave Woodrelli. I am joined by Harmon Dial. We debated on doing an emergency episode, but we didn't. We're giving you a regular episode of Canucks Conversation. Obviously, a lot to talk about. We touched on it a bit yesterday. Alex McGillney in the Hockey Hall of Fame. Biggest news of the day. I'm kidding, of course. It was, in fact, Evander Kane being traded to your Vancouver Canucks for a fourth-round pick. We're going to be joined by Talia Remchuk of Oilers Nation and Daily Faceoff in a matter of moments. But before that, Harmon, just your initial reaction to this trade.
Yeah, my reaction is mixed. I can see the legitimate upside case for how it could work out, but I also see significant risk here. And not risk in terms of what they gave up, because who cares about a fourth-round pick, but whether or not he can be a top six solution, the locker room fit, and of course the opportunity cost, where the Canucks had around $12 million in cap space and they've committed nearly half that to Kane. And I think the simplest way for us to work through that is for me to kind of give a brief overview of sort of the Cole's notes of both the positives and negatives I see. Sure. So on the positives front, he can still score, right? He had 24 goals in the 2023-24 season. 12 points in 21 games during this year's Stanley Cup playoff run for the Oilers. He has rare power forward qualities, right? Mean streak, hard to play against, the toughness. And we know that this Canucks team needed more size, more bite, more edge up front, especially in that top six. I also don't put as much emphasis on the whole, why would the Canucks bail out a divisional rival in the Oilers? And that's the contract the Oilers wanted to move. In my mind, somebody was going to take a flyer on Evander Kane, even if it wasn't the Vancouver Canucks. Free agent market is weak. Teams have an abundance of cap space. Only 1 year of term left. Look at Andre Burakovsky in Seattle. He was coming off a 10-goal, 37-point season. Yep. He has 2 years left at $5.5 million, and the Kraken found a taker for Burakovsky without retaining salary or paying sweeteners, offloading him to Chicago. So I don't think it's an indictment on the Canucks that, how could the Canucks have bailed out the Oilers here? In my mind, somebody was going to take that Kane contract on, and the Oilers weren't going to have to pay a significant sweetener anyway. Now, the question marks I have, I'm not convinced if you can rely on him as a full-time top six player, right? So, yeah, he scored 24 goals the last time we saw him in a full regular season, but he is slow foot speed-wise. He does not drive play, and he's quite below average defensively when you look at his wall work, D-zone puck management. If he's not scoring, there are large stretches when he can be when he can have a negative effect on a line's ability to control play. And I mean, Patrick Allvin himself referred to Kane as a middle six / top nine forward.
Was just about to point that out.
And I think that's a very realistic assessment of what Kane is at in his career. He's not a surefire guaranteed top six guy. He's more middle six. And I also have concerns about sort of the injuries and health aspects, and can his body hold up over the course of a full 82 games and the playoffs, right? So this year, for example, he looked good in the playoffs up until the Cup final, where he came unglued and took a bunch of undisciplined penalties, but he didn't play a single regular season game, right? So he was fully fresh heading into the playoffs. You look at the 2023-24 season, all right, he had a solid regular season with 24 goals, but then his body seemed to break down in the postseason. If you remember the Canucks-Oilers series, he often looked like an anchor at times for the Oilers. He only had 4 goals in 20 games in that playoff run. And then the 2022-23 season, he was only healthy for 41 games. So this is 3 years in a row where Kane has either missed at least half or more of the regular season because of injuries, or in the case of the 2023-24 season, he stayed healthy in the regular season, but his body broke down in the playoffs, and he was largely a non-factor. And then lastly, of course, the locker room fit and character angle. We can dive into that later, but that has to, in my mind, still be a legitimate sort of question mark, especially in the wake of the Canucks coming off a season where Rutherford and Allvin at end of season availability, when they made their opening statement and were summarizing how the season unfolded, they led with the locker room sort of angle, the dysfunction, and how they felt that resulted in the Canucks having a disappointing campaign. So to sum it up, my reaction is mixed. Again, I can see the upside case, but I also see significant risk here.
All in all, as we get to the poll question later in the show, which is, you probably guessed, how do you feel about the Evander Kane trade? I'm on the side of liking it. I think at the end of the day, I look at the acquisition cost and I look at all of those pros that you just said, and I say, yeah, I like this. And again, I've said for a while now, I wrote about this at Canucks Army as well. This team was missing so much of that toughness and that snarl that Nikita Zadorov had, and they lost it when they lost Nikita Zadorov, and they really didn't have any of it this year. That guy riding shotgun with Elias Pettersson sounds like it's good, but again, that's a perfect scenario. You said it yourself. Patrick Allvin said it. Middle six, top 9 forward. That also made me think maybe they're going to go get another guy, which is something else we're going to talk about, because I was just at Rogers Arena and had this conversation with Allvin. I flat out asked him, about acquiring that top 6 center. Talked about that. We're going to get to that later in the show, but I did want to point this out because one thing that Allvin said, and one thing we're seeing in the chat immediately, and I keep in mind, I say this as someone that is all in all in favor of this trade and likes this trade. Okay. So keep that in mind before I say this. I like this trade. I like it for the Canucks. There are people that are just saying, oh, you can't even talk about the character issues or the negatives with the off ice because there were no problems in Edmonton the past 2 years. And quite frankly, Patrick Allvin basically said that when he was asked about that aspect, which of course we knew was coming. We knew he was going to get that question. He just said, well, I haven't heard of anything in the past 2 years. And, even put some cold water in the stuff that happened before that. But for the people in the chat that are saying, don't even talk about it because these past 2 years, I think you need to look a little further and say, okay, why was that the case? What made that Oilers locker room, oldest team in the NHL, what made them able to keep a personality that's had problems before, keep that personality in check? Like what made them able to do that? Because I don't think it's as simple as, oh, Evander Kane's grown, he's this great person, and hey, that could absolutely be part of it. That could absolutely be the whole thing. But I think you realistically have to look at it and try to figure out the why behind it, if that makes sense. Like I look at his room, and that's a pretty good room.
Yeah, and I can understand where some people are looking at and saying it's a contract year for him. He is incentivized to be on his best behavior. I understand that.
I'm one of those people. I wrote that. I think you're going to get the best version of Kane off the ice and on the ice. Hand up. I said that.
For sure. I see that angle, and it's legitimate. But I also, to your point about unpacking why the Oilers were able to kind of keep Kane in check and there weren't problems there compared to his previous teams in the NHL, it's a completely different leadership structure. I think it's far easier to fall in line when you're playing with a team that has McDavid and Draisaitl on it and runs a tight ship leadership wise. Whereas you come to Vancouver, we know that there's a huge sort of drop off in leadership after Quinn Hughes. This is a team that's dealt with a ton of dysfunction, a ton of drama, and can you, as players, hold him accountable, and as a group, hold him accountable the same way that the Oilers were able to? It's a different situation. It's apples and oranges, I think. And again, this isn't me saying, oh, I think Evander Kane's going to be a bad locker room fit per se, but I don't think you can completely gloss over those concerns just because the last 2 or 3 years in Edmonton didn't have as many bumps in the road.
And we're going to continue this conversation, I'm sure. I believe Evander Kane's going to speak tomorrow. The Canucks PR staff said that they're hoping that he's going to be able to speak tomorrow, so we'll be reacting to that tomorrow. We're also playing Family Feud tomorrow. Get your responses in. I think we're almost done. Make sure you get your responses in for Family Feud. We're going to be playing tomorrow, so make sure you get that. But I want to bring in our guest today, Talia Remchuk of Oilers Nation and Daily Faceoff. He joins us. He's a presentation of Pacific Toyota dealers who want to tell you about the 100% electric Toyota BZ4X, an SUV packed with plenty of space. The BZ4X can handle any terrain and can take you from the city to the slopes. It's backed by the peace of mind that comes with knowing you're driving a Toyota. And if you're driving a BZ4X, you get access to HOV lanes, even if you're driving alone. When you choose the BZ4X, you can get a $5,000 incentive. And now you can finance a 2025 BZ4X LE all-wheel drive from 0.99% APR for 36 months. Visit shoptoyota.ca or your local Pacific Toyota dealer today. Let's bring him in. Talia Remchuk joins us now. Tyler, your initial reaction from an Oilers perspective. I'm not asking you to be Daily Face-Off Tyler right now. I'm talking Oilers Nation Tyler, okay?
All right.
Your initial reaction to the trade this morning.
I wonder if this is a massive deal and the Oilers are somehow getting a goalie. That was Oilers Nation Tyler. Daily Faceoff Tyler was, I wonder if the Oilers found a way to get out of this full cap hit. So the truth landed somewhere in the middle, as it usually does when the two parts of my brain start arguing. But honestly, for the Oilers, just getting out of that $5.1 million is significant when you look at their cap picture. And the expectation for me realistically coming in was like, okay, if Marchment got a third and a fourth and he's, maybe a better player with obviously a little bit less baggage as well, then Evander Kane probably gets a smaller return than that. So seeing the fourth round pick come across wasn't surprising. The Oilers getting out of the full cap hit, that's the clear win from their perspective.
When you look at Kane's tenure in Edmonton, it obviously started really strong. The last couple of years were maybe a little bit more mixed because of injuries, and his performance itself was also a little bit more up and down. It seemed like there were spurts where he was really productive in the top six, but also other parts where sort of felt like he was further down the lineup and largely a non-factor. When you look at Evander Kane, the player, the last couple of years, how would you describe his impact?
It's so hit and miss. Like, we were kind of reliving his best moments today on the show. And man, when he came in that 2022 playoff run, scored 7 goals against the LA Kings in one series, had the hat trick against the Flames in round 2. Even that second playoff run, he was so good for them. But as he aged a couple of years and as the injuries piled up, he became a player who, when he was rolling, it was like, man, this is a legit top 6 power forward who you can rely on for offense, and you can play him on a scoring line. And they did that a lot with Leon Draisaitl. But when he was even just off a little bit, it became he was off a lot, if that makes sense. Like, you couldn't really trust him in a fourth line role because he's poor defensively and he doesn't skate that well. And it takes a lot for him to make an impact physically because he doesn't get in on the forecheck particularly hard. Like, it just got to a point where, as much as there was an upside there that you would see little flashes of, the Oilers couldn't afford to keep that sort of volatility in their lineup for north of $5 million. So he just became the range of what you get from Evander Kane started to widen a little bit, is I think the best way for me to put it, as he got older and as the injuries kept piling up. But man, that 2022 Evander Kane, when, to kind of what you guys were talking about earlier, when he was on his best behavior and he had, a chip on his shoulder and something to prove, he brought something, a swagger to their lineup, an impact to their top 6 that they just so desperately needed. I just think for the Oilers, the last 2 years, you just weren't getting enough of it. And I think it's fair to look at a 33-year-old who's going to be 34 by the time the season starts, who's coming off 2 major surgeries in the last 12 months and another serious injury with the wrist laceration 2 years before that. I think for the Oilers, it was like, okay, we might not get that peak level for more than 15, 20 games next season. If we get it, it's not a risk that we're willing to take.
I want this question to go to Daily Faceoff, Tyler. Okay.
Yeah.
What did you think of the trade for the Canucks? Like, do you like it from a Canucks perspective?
I don't mind it. Again, I think in an ideal world, you maybe find a way to get the Oilers to keep a little bit of that money. And listen, who knows if what Dan Milstein is tweeting is the truth or if it's posturing. But like he said, there were 3 suitors. So maybe the Canucks sat there and went, okay, the Oilers are telling us they have 2 other teams who are going to do this at the full cap hit. We're going to take a stab on it. And again, like, highly motivated. Yes, the difference in him having a 20-goal season versus him being a problem off the ice or a problem in the room and playing third or fourth line minutes, like, his next contract's either going to be a 1-year prove-it deal for $2 million somewhere, or it's going to be another 3-4 year contract because some team believes in him and they give him $3-4 million a year. So we're talking about a guy who's probably playing next year for like a total of $10 million in his bank account on that next deal, not all in 1 year, but like over the course of the contract. So the Canucks should get a highly motivated player. And, if he clicks next to Elias Pettersson, for example, and becomes this guy who, is disruptive physically and finishes off the scoring chances he's getting, like, there's a real chance the Canucks have found themselves a 20 to 25 goal guy here for one season, much like the Oilers got for that one season or season and a half when he first joined the team. So I don't hate the risk that the Canucks are taking here, but I mean, just reading what I've read, and you guys are obviously in a way better position to speak about this than me, but like, Pius Suter scored a lot of goals for you guys last year. The idea that you don't want to pay the 29-year-old Suter $4 to $5 million, but you're okay making a $5 million gamble on Evander Kane. That's the part where I kind of raised an eyebrow and was like, I don't know if this was the right play. Like, the hole's at center in Vancouver, is it not on the wing necessarily?
Yeah, it is. It absolutely is. And we were just talking to Patrick Oveen. I was just there, and I just asked him literally about this, the hunt for a top 6 center. And I asked if he wanted to create more cap space on July 1st. He kind of dodged the question a bit by saying It's not just about creating cap space. It's about the players that we can get with that cap space. So he dodged it, which is fair, but they still want to get that top 6 center. And he said, like, they're still looking for that. They're still trying to get that done. My question is, can they get that done? Can they get Kane? And then can they get Suter? Because and just to lay it out, right? This is my basic take on the Kane trade, is that you look at this trade and you say, okay, from an asset perspective, like pure values, it's a fine trade for the Canucks, but they're a little tight on cap space. So you want them to have another move coming, and they're a little tight on cap space. So that might be a little bit tough, but I look at it and say, okay, if they can create some cap space, if they can go get a Marco Rossi and fix that need at center, and then they re-sign Pia Suter and give themselves some solid depth at the center position. Suter can obviously play wing as well. And you add Kane to that. I think those 3 players, I think you exit the offseason where we know it's tough to do business right now, and you say that's a fine haul for the Canucks to walk away with. And that's how I kind of view today's trade. Is like, let's see what happens in a week, 2 weeks from now. Let's see what this team actually looks like. That's how I'm viewing it, at least.
Yeah, and I mean, hey, let's say that this season, let's walk through a path of it goes well for Evander Kane, but maybe it doesn't go well for the Canucks. If you were to keep 50% of Evander Kane and he's got, let's say, 15 goals by the trade deadline, 12, 13 goals, if you keep half, you're getting a lot more than a than a 4th round pick from somebody if you keep the money. So this could also be a way to, you sacrifice a 4th round pick now, but the worst case scenario could be you end up just keeping half and in a way buying a higher draft pick in the 2026 draft, which from what I've read is a much deeper and better draft class as well. So like there's still a way that this ends up working out well for the Canucks in the sense that Kane either comes through and plays well and it's a push for the playoffs, or it doesn't go well. Kane plays well, you flip him at the deadline. I think again, the real concern would be that I saw the moment that sticks out to me from earlier last season. So this year, he obviously didn't play in the regular season, but last year there was a game against Winnipeg where Kane dropped the gloves in the first period, fought someone on the Jets, Saturday night, hockey night in Canada. And then he got the intermission interview. And in the interview, he tells Scott Oak, well, if I'm just going to sit on the bench, I might as well sit in the penalty box. So I figured, why not fight? And it was very much a, it's about me moment for Evander Kane. And he will have a lot of those. Like if it doesn't go well for Evander, is he going to be pouting? Is he going to be, if he's on the 4th line, giving you any sort of effort at all? Like those are fair questions to ask when you have a guy with the character of Evander Kane. So there's upside here. Again, looking at the cap picture, there's room for the Canucks to obviously do more. But I think you're right. If this is the one move that the Canucks point to at the end of the offseason and go, that guy fixes our forward group, that's where I'd throw caution up and be like, he can be a good complementary piece, not an elite complementary piece or anything like that. And he certainly can't be a driver.
What kind of line mates does he work best with stylistically? Obviously, he's had moments where he's played with Draisaitl, moments where he hasn't played with Draisaitl. Does Kane need to play with a star centerman who can really drive the bus to make an impact? Or is he a player that, okay, maybe if he doesn't click with Pettersson, he could work on a line further down the lineup, let's say a playmaker like Connor Garland?
Yeah, like again, just to Kane's imperfections as a player, I think in a way you need to have perfect line mates for it to work. Like there were stretches where they'd put him with Draisaitl and Kapanen. Okay, Kapanen is not good defensively at all. Draisaitl is a great playmaker, but that line was just so poor in their own end that you never almost really got to see what they could do in the offensive end. The one line, if you look back through the numbers during the playoffs, that really, really worked was Hyman, Nuge, and Kane. You put a guy who could be a dog on the forecheck like Kane. You put a good cerebral playmaker in Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, and Evander Kane was able to get some looks and sort of, even if he wasn't rolling shift to shift, the other two guys were kind of buzzing, and he found a way to capitalize on that. That line was, I think, if you look after the end of the first round, they were statistically, analytically, like one of the best lines in the entire playoffs. Their expected goals for share was like 78% or something. Granted, unsustainable, but very, very good in that short sample size. So I do think you need we're not just talking like one player that matches with Kane. It's probably two. It's another winger who forechecks really hard and can create turnovers and create some space for Evander Kane to get his shot off. And it's a playmaker in there as well who can get the puck to him because, again, he's good at shooting and scoring. Hitting sometimes. The rest, that's for the line mates to figure out with Evander.
Tyler, thanks so much for doing this, man. We'll see you on July 1st, the free agency show.
Yes, free agent special on Daily Faceoff. Can't wait. Thanks, boys.
Love it. There he is, Talia Remchuk, who, like I said, you can watch on the free agent special on July 1st. Note the start time, folks. It goes live at 8 a.m. Pacific. You will not want to miss it. We're going to have a panel. We're going to have Jeff Merrick, Matthew Barnaby, tons of guys on that show that you're going to want to hear from. Tyler, in my humble opinion, being chief among them. So make sure you're watching. Make sure you're watching on the Daily Faceoff YouTube channel on July 1st. Some interesting stuff there from Tyler for sure. I think the question you asked sparked a really interesting response about the line mates. When you look at this trade, Harm, and I laid it out. I was saving this, but I laid it out in the interview for Tyler because he said it. I look at this trade, and the first thing I wrote when I wrote about this at Canucks Army, it's up now, CanucksArmy.com. 6 thoughts after the Canucks trade for Evander Kane. Number one, the first thing that came to my mind was, okay, I like that on paper, but what's next, right? And I've said this for all offseason. You got to go get 2 or 3 forwards for this group. If Evander Kane's the 3rd best forward you trade for, I'm looking, or not trade for, I guess you could re-sign Pius Suter. If Evander Kane's the 3rd best forward that you get this offseason, I look at it and say, okay, they've done something right. This is great. But if Evander Kane is what you do, and then all you do is re-sign Pius Suter, I'm sorry, that's a failure of an offseason. And look, I'm not saying that's completely out of the Canucks, or that was completely in the Canucks' control. I get that it's hard to make trades right now. Patrick Alvin was talking about that today, the parity in the league and how hard it's been. We've heard about all the struggles to get Marco Rossi out of Minnesota. But if you're able to pull off that Rossi trade, and in the process clear some cap space because you sent Dakota Joshua back the other way, or you sent Connor Garland, or whoever, like pick a name. I'm not trying to pick on anyone. Nils Höglander, pick a name, okay? You clear some cap space, you trade for Marco Rossi, you re-sign Pius Suter, and you bring in Evander Kane. I'm looking at that and saying, given the circumstances, that's about as good of an offseason as they could have.
Yeah, it does largely depend on what they do next. Now, my potential concern with, let's say, the excitement around Rossi and Kane would be you've acquired 2 players that aren't line drivers, if that makes sense. You've acquired 2 players that ideally are the 2nd or 3rd best player on a line. And what I mean by that is, of course, Tyler sort of laid out the scenario with Kane, where sometimes it's not just playing with Draisaitl, but needing an effective winger on the opposite wing too, so that Kane can sort of do his thing. And in Rossi's case, he was stapled with one of Kaprizov or Boldy all season, star, like game-breaking winger. And so coming to Vancouver, when I look at how does this team improve its offensive ceiling, it's not just adding complementary guys that could be the 2nd or 3rd best player on a line. It's who can actually drive the bus and legitimately elevate others. And so you acquire one of those guys in Kane, that's fine. Like that can work. But ideally, the next player that you go and get is somebody that can drive a line and make others better, because otherwise you're going to be stuck in a tier where you've got guys like, DeBrusk is a good player, but he can't be the best player and drive a top 6 line on his own. Evander Kane's in the same boat. So you don't want to collect too many players that you look at and go, all right, this guy could give you 50, 60 points, but it's only in an ideal circumstance when he's playing with a star player. And we only really have one star on the Canucks, and Elias Pettersson, who, if he's at his best, can elevate guys like Kane and DeBrusk. So that's something to keep in mind as well. Is it's not just how many goals and points can this guy put up. It's, can this guy drive play? Can he make others better? Or is he reliant on others to get him the puck? Evander Kane is sort of in that latter category where the fit matters a lot. And so that's something to be mindful of too, as the Canucks seek out further upgrades.
Got to do more. And I know there's a lot of people that don't like this acquisition, this trade. My stance on it is that I'm somewhere in between disliking it and liking it. I'm right in between. I'm right in the middle. And I know that's boring, but I'm leaning toward liking it. And I think I'll really like it if they go get Marco Rossi, JJ Peterka, one of those premier guys, and then they go re-sign PSG, or they get someone else. They have to do more than this. They have to. And it can't just be a Suter re-signing. I just said that, but it can't just be a Suter re-signing. It can't be a mediocre move.
It's going to be tough, though, to realistically go out and, let's say, get Peterka, re-sign Suter, and have Kane. I just don't know how you're going to make that work cap-wise. So I think that's a little bit far-fetched.
They're going to have to move out salary, and I think they're going to figure out a way to do it.
Yeah, we'll see. It's going to require some creativity. And again, even with Rossi, I like him as a player, but I would still have that question mark about, you've acquired 2 players who are complementary scorers. Like Rossi, despite being 5'9", a lot of times when you look at a 5'9" center, you go, all right, you expect this guy to be a slick playmaker, speedy zone entries, more of a perimeter-oriented player. But Rossi doesn't play like your typical 5'9" center. He's a dog on a bone. He's a net front scorer, goes to the gritty, dirty areas. But again, he needs a playmaker to feed him the puck in those spots. Evander Kane, same sort of thing. Tyler referred to it. He's got a great shot. He hits sometimes, but outside of that, he's inconsistent on the forecheck. He's not somebody that's going to help transition the puck up the ice. He's kind of slow, so he's another player that you would look at and go, he needs somebody else to sort of drive the bus. And that's, I guess, big picture as we look at this Canucks team and how do they raise their offensive ceiling, is you need players that can manufacture offense on their own, that can create scoring chances on their own. And honestly, this is where I look at somebody like a Filipino, and I think his health and availability is so important this coming season, because he's one of those players that actually checks the box. Like, that's an example of, all right, Hedl may not put up the flashiest point totals, but because of his speed, because of how many zone entries he drives, and how many scoring chances he produces for himself and his line mates in the brief time that we saw him as a Vancouver Canuck, he can help drive a line. And if you put him with legitimate scorers, like, that's a combination that could work. And so if you get a healthy, productive version of Filipino, all right, now all of a sudden other pieces like Kane fit better on your chessboard. Whereas if Hedl struggles to stay healthy, if he can't play his best, then all of a sudden you might be stuck with a bunch of forwards that you look at and go, they on other teams in ideal spots could put up points, but we just aren't able to build chemistry with these guys. And even when we think about a potential Evander Kane fit, I know a lot of people are immediately going to go to the Elias Pettersson angle, and maybe those guys work, but I would also be intrigued by the possibility of, let's say, a Kane, Hedl, Garland line. That could really work, where Hedl drives zone entries, Garland is a dog on a bone on the forecheck. You got two guys that can do the heavy lifting and the hard work for a line in terms of winning puck battles, transporting it up the ice, getting you in the offensive zone, and then all Evander Kane really has to do is get open and finish his chances. That's a combination that could work.
I love it. I love it. I love answering the question of where's this guy going to fit in the lineup. We've got a super chat here. This is from Nothing is Perfect. Fitting name, I think, for a day like today. He said, Canucks fans were burned last season by locker room drama, so this trade is tough to swallow. But word is he being Kane, is a changed man. So I'm going to take it as a win. Thank you for the super chat and the $5 donation to the BC Mental Health Foundation. If you want to make sure your question or comment gets on the show, hit us with a super chat. Proceeds from our super chat all go to the BC Mental Health Foundation, changing the face of mental health and addiction by supporting breakthroughs in care, public understanding, research, and knowledge exchange. Okay, Harm, I want to get to the poll question because we've got some stuff on Thatcher Demco that we have to discuss. A potential extension coming for Thatcher Demco. We're going to get to that and anyone else, but first I want to get to our poll question, which is a presentation of our friends over at Greta. By now you know that Greta is a great spot to watch the big game, but did you know it's an even better spot for your upcoming party or event? If you need a venue for a team building or summer social event, check out Greta. They've got the street food menu, they've got the arcade games, and of course they've got the bar. It's always a fun time with plenty of options. My personal favorite, the smash burger on the menu and the football game in the arcade. So make Greta your spot for your next event. For more info and to book your event, go to gretabar.com. Greta Bar YVR, 50 West Cordova Street is the address. Let the games begin. All right, our poll question today, like I said, you could have guessed what it would be on a day like today. How do you feel about the Evander Kane trade? Our options were love it, like it, meh, and hate it. Leading the way with 42.7% of the vote is hate it. 32.2% say meh, 17.6% say they like it, 7.6% say they love it. I'm somewhere, like I said, I'm somewhere between like it and meh, but I am leaning more toward like it because I think this team's going to get more stuff done. If they don't, though, I will be in the meh and the hate it crew. But on paper, I like this trade.
I'm in the meh category. Again, I can see the upside case of it working out, but I worry about whether you're going to, as Tyler was talking about, Kane's a player that's on and off. And as he becomes older, turns 34 years old, and especially with the injury history, I worry about how he's going to hold up from a health perspective and actually getting the best version of Evander Kane. Because again, you look at the last 3 years, he hasn't been able to sustain staying healthy in the regular season and being productive in the playoffs. I just don't know if at this stage in his career, with the amount of miles that he has on his body at the stage, the serious injuries that he suffered the last couple of years, whether you can look at Kane and say, we can rely on him to stay healthy in the regular season and give us production in the playoffs. I wonder about that volatility. And that's why I have skepticism and concerns about whether he can be a full-time top 6 player for you, not only because of that, but because of the slow foot speed, he doesn't drive play angle, the below average defensively, and the fact that, again, when he's not scoring, he's not really doing a whole lot else for your line outside of, throwing the bodies. So I have some concerns. And of course the locker room fit, like that's still something that has to be top of mind. And this is a team that's trying to rebuild its culture. And I get I get the angle of he's likely to be on his best behavior because he's playing for his next contract. But the history and the baggage pre-Edmonton, there's a lot of rough stuff there. And as an organization, you want to bring good people into your organization. That matters. And the Canucks are in a transitional phase. And I think it's fair to say that there's some uncertainty around exactly how Kane will fit, especially if, whether it's for him individually or for the team, there are stretches when things go off the rails. Because you think back to even, let's say, the Miller-Pettersson relationship, it was workable when the team was winning and when things were going perfectly. But we know in Vancouver that things don't often go perfectly. And so when you inevitably hit choppy waters, that's when you're truly tested as far as how does Kane fit with this locker room? How does Kane fit with this team? And so if we start in October and the first 6 weeks are amazing and he finds his fit, great. But what happens if in the middle of the season he goes through a rough patch and he's demoted down the lineup into the bottom 6? Is he going to pout? Is he going to be less engaged? And we heard Tyler talking about that story where in that game against Winnipeg, he drops the gloves, and in that interview with Scott Oak, basically takes an indirect shot at being demoted down the lineup, and that sort of comes off in a pretty selfish manner. I don't think you can just look at, there weren't too many problems in Edmonton and say it's guaranteed to be a good fit from a locker room and personality and character perspective for the Canucks and Kane.
Okay. We're going to have this conversation, I'm sure, about Evander Kane for a while. We're going to continue to talk about this in Anyone Else, I'm sure, but I want to start Anyone Else because we got some Demco stuff to get to. Let's get to Anyone Else. It is brought to you by our friends at the Vancouver Canadian. The Seas are back at the Nat this week for a long homestand of 9 games in 10 days. They've got fireworks on Thursday the 26th, a nooner at the Nat on the 27th, Marvel Superhero Day on the 28th, and Celebrate Canada Day on July 1st with a 1:05 p.m. first pitch and bucket hat giveaway. The Nat is going to be rocking all week and into next week as well. For tickets, call 604-872-5232 or check out CanadiansBaseball.com. Okay, according to Darren Dreger on TSN, whatever the station out there is, he said that there is progress. Yeah, it does sound like progress has been made on a multi-year extension for Thatcher Demco with the Canucks. An extension is far more likely than a trade at this point. Rick Dhaliwal jumped in after and said there is a pathway to a Thatcher Demco extension in Vancouver by the end of the week. Not done, but a pathway. We don't have the audio, but I did want to read it because I have it transcribed. This is what Patrick Allvin said today, because he was asked about Thatcher Demco. This is what he had to say. It's been a really good conversation with Thatcher and his agent, and we'll see here over the next couple of days or weeks if we can get something in place. Harman, as I pull up my piece where I predicted what the extension would look like, your reaction to this news.
Yeah, we'll see what the cap hit and term ends up looking like. I can understand why the Canucks are exploring the idea of an extension, because Demko is one of those players that if he can stay healthy, he can give you borderline Vezina caliber goaltending. And what does that do to raise the ceiling of this team? When you look at the Canucks, what they really need more than anything is high-end sort of potential elite talent, right? We know that with their forward group, for example, they've got enough quality third and fourth liners. we know that on the back end, they're in a pretty good situation. But for them to take that next step and be a surefire playoff team and eventually get to the point where they can win a round or two in the playoffs, they need more true top of the lineup stars. Talent is hard to come by in this league right now. And as much as Demko has risk and flaws, and I see the red flags as far as his injuries and his availability, he has that upside case. And I've long talked about him as a lottery ticket where you don't know if he's going to stay healthy. You don't know what version of him you're going to get. But if you do get lucky, you're going to get a player that's a top 5 goaltender in the league. And when you look at a group that on paper probably isn't going to score a lot, but has a pretty good blue line. And if Demko returns, you're looking at that goaltending tandem as an edge. That's kind of the formula of how this Canucks team is probably going to be looking at winning games next season.
My final prediction for a Demko extension was 4 years at $6.75 million or 3 years at $7.5 million. It'll be interesting to see if they're around there. Now, the natural question, as I'm seeing in the chat during anyone else, what does this mean for Kevin Lankinen? What does this mean for Archer Shelovs? Obviously, Kevin Lankinen was extended by the Canucks this season, year 1 of that extension, with a full no-move clause for the first 2 years, kicks in this season coming up. Another interesting answer from Patrick Alvin was on Archer Shelovs. Of course, he being the playoff MVP, Archer Shelovs, the Calder Cup playoff MVP, the Calder Cup champion, Archer Shelovs. That's quite the resume, isn't it? Patrick Alvin certainly wants you to think so, and he certainly sounds like he wants other GMs to think so. Again, this is the quote from Patrick Alvin. Well, it was a hell of a performance. I'm happy for Artie. We know that he's a really good goalie, and this is just justifying that. That being said, we still got a couple good goalies in the system here with Tolopilo and Ty Young that are more than ready to play as well. So we'll see here over the next couple of days and where things go here. And then, again, the conversation about Demko continued after that. But that was an interesting one. Why are you name dropping Ty Young? Why are you name dropping Nikita Tolopilo, who doesn't even have a contract for next season? And I think the answer, I'm not saying this in like, oh, I can't believe you do this. I think the answer to this is that trading Archer Shelovs is absolutely on the table for this team, and it might be something that they're going to do lead in the days leading up to the draft.
Yeah, if they extend Demko and you're worried about him getting claimed off waivers, which is probably increasingly likely considering it was one thing for him to have a first 3 rounds of the playoffs where he was strong, but to go 5 deep win the Calder Cup and AHL playoff MVP, like the percentage odds of Shelovs getting claimed off waivers has just been increasing by the day.
Yeah,
like a couple of weeks ago, it was probably still a potential coin flip, right? Whereas it's probably more likely than not.
Sure.
That he wouldn't, and in that case, you don't want to lose the asset for nothing. So if you come to terms with Demko on an extension, you're probably looking at shopping Shelovs. And again, I'm not expecting the return to be a lot because he doesn't have much of a track record at the NHL level, and even at the AHL level, he hasn't been elite in the regular season. But you also don't want to lose the asset for nothing.
People in the chat are suggesting trading Kevin Lankinen instead. And I laid out yesterday. Was it yesterday? When was it when I was talking about trading a goaltender, signing a veteran backup who can be like your buffer if Shelovs isn't in fact quite ready just yet? I talked about that yesterday, I think. But anyways, people are bringing that up. They're bringing up Kevin Lankinen being dealt. Kevin Lankinen's no move clause doesn't kick in until July 1. You are correct. So the Canucks do have 5 days to trade Kevin Lankinen, 30 days in June. But that's bad business. Like signing a guy to an extension and then trading him right before the no move clause kicks in, that's bad business. And I don't think the Canucks would go down that road. I really don't. I don't think it's really an option. So I appreciate that people are trying to get creative, but I really don't think, Kevin Lankinen's going to be dealt here. I don't think that's really an option for this team.
Yeah, I'd be shocked if they extended him only to trade him before the contract even kicks in, especially because you know that, and I'm sure the Canucks are well aware that even if they extend Demko and have confidence in him, you can't rely on him to play 50 games. You just don't know at this point. He's still a wild card. He's still a lottery ticket, whatever you want to call him. He's got the upside case, the elite sort of ceiling to be a massive difference maker for you, but you need a contingency plan in place in case he gets hurt again. Even if he's healthy, you know that you can't drive him into the ground and have him on pace for 50, 55 starts. And so you need a quality 1B. Shilov's as great as he's been at the AHL level, hasn't yet proven. We don't know for certain whether he can be that guy in the NHL who can give you 30, 35 games reliably, whereas Lankinen has proven that he can do that, not only in Vancouver this year, but in the past when he was in Nashville and in Chicago, that he can be a really talented 1B. I'd be really, really surprised. I don't think that trading Lankinen is realistically on the table for them at this juncture.
Okay, that's all I had on goalies, so we will continue to monitor this situation. Of course, if you're just joining us, there's a lot of people. Make sure you subscribe to the Canucks Army YouTube channel. Check out Canucks Conversation wherever you get your podcasts. We're here 5 days a week, even in the off season right now. We've been going strong, so make sure you subscribe. We're going to play Family Feud tomorrow. You don't want to miss that. Trust me. A lot of new people watching this show. Family Feud's the best thing we do on this show. You're not going to want to miss it. So tomorrow, 2 p.m., we go live again. But I did want to say this. If you're just joining us, Thatcher Demco, progress with the Canucks being made on an extension, according to TSN's Darren Drager. Dollywall saying a pathway is there for Thatcher Demco extension. So we will see how this goes. Okay. I want to revisit the moves that they still have to make, right? One thing that Patrick Allvin was asked about was, are you going to use that 15th overall pick? Like, you still have it in your pocket, just a couple days away from the NHL draft. Are you going to use it? And he said, I was just in the scouting room, and he really played it up. He said, I was just in the scouting room. A lot of good players available at 15. If I were a team, I would trade for the 15th overall pick. Personally, I think there's going to be a lot of great players. I'm misquoting a little bit, but you get the gist of what I'm saying. He did kind of have a smile on his face when he said, as of now, we're going to use it. So certainly still on the table is what I took away. And I'm just trying to think, did you listen to the presser? I know I was standing there, but sometimes as I'm there asking the questions and thinking about what I'm going to ask, I don't really clock everything that was said. Was there anything else that stuck out to you from the Allvin presser?
Yeah, I was listening to it. No, I think we talked about the main takeaways from that. He himself was talking about, we'll see what happens, and chopping that pick. I think that tells you all you need to know as far as it being available. And then the other main takeaway was just their description of Kane as a middle 6/top 9 winger as opposed to top 6, which is accurate and is fair. It's hopefully a sign that they understand, hey, we brought in a top 9 winger, not a surefire top 6 guy, meaning we need to aim high with whoever we land next. This can't just be we brought in Kane, we're going to re-sign Suter, sign 1 or 2 depth guys and call it a day, because that would be a pretty disappointing outcome.
Absolutely agree with you. Okay, I already talked about the Daily Faceoff free agent special, but before that, we're going to have a draft special, the Sheet draft special, live on the Daily Faceoff YouTube channel on Friday, June 27th at 4 p.m. Pacific. We're bringing you real-time coverage of the 2025 draft, diving into every pick as it happens. You're going to not want to miss that one. Live June 27th, like I said, 4 p.m. Pacific on the Daily Faceoff YouTube channel. Subscribe now so you don't miss a moment. And subscribe to the Canucks Army YouTube channel too. You should be here tomorrow. I want everybody on this show right now. We've got hundreds and hundreds of people watching right now, and even more on Twitter. Wow. There's a lot of people watching us right now. Make sure you tune in tomorrow to watch Family Feud. Anything else that you wanted to get to, Harm, before we get ready to close out here?
One thing that I'm thinking about in the wake of the Kane acquisition is, I've previously mentioned how much money the Canucks already have committed to middle of the lineup forwards. I wonder if something gives there. As far as they've got a lot of players in that $2.5 to $5-ish million range that are significant salary commitments. You look at them as players and go, they're not surefire guaranteed top 6 guys. They're more in the middle 6 tier. Does that mean the Canucks look to shed one of those salaries? Because you have Evander Kane in that boat now at $5.1 million, Connor Garland at $4.95, Hedl at $4.4, Joshua at $3.25, Höglander at 3, Drew O'Connor at 2.5. That's a lot of salary committed to a glut of players that you would look at and go, those are middle six guys on playoff teams. And does that mean a player like Höglander is expendable? I think Drance today was floating around the idea of them potentially shopping Dakota Joshua, like him being a name to keep an eye on. That's something that I wonder about. If you're unable to extend Garland, does he become a trade chip? I wonder about that glut of kind of middle of the lineup forwards they have, where there's a lot of salary committed there. And if you want to still land a true difference making top six forward or two, if something gives there.
I like that. And I think you're right. I think you're right. It's going to be really interesting to see how they kind of navigate this, because they are going to have to create more cap space. And again, like I said, I asked Alvin about that. He dodged it a bit.
Well, that's also where I talked about the glut of kind of middle six caliber guys that are making significant salaries. I don't think you can just double down and now sign Pius Suter without removing one of the players from that club.
Sure. Because we haven't even talked about Abbotsford either. Like, you got Linus Karlsson coming. He's got to play next year.
Well, that's one angle, but even from the perspective of like how many third-ish line caliber guys that you look at and go, all right, he can play on a second line. Like, how many of those guys are you going to collect and pay in the sort of $2.5 to $5 million range? There's got to be a limit at some point. And yeah, I think if you're re-signing Suter, which sounds like the way I'm sort of viewing that Suter possibility, we talked about this earlier. Again, I would hope that they can do better than Pius Suter, but I wonder if they look at, all right, this trade market is really rough for top six centers. We may just have to look at Suter as our last resort, break glass in case of emergency option, just to shore up the center ice position. And he's a versatile piece that can move up and down the lineup. At $4.5 million, maybe they view that as a sort of backup option. But again, if you do that, you got to move out some contract in that $3 to $5 million range.
Okay.
In my mind.
So I want to lay out a scenario for you, because I think this is a home run. This is what they should do. You trade for Marco Rossi. You move out one of those contracts that you're talking about. They want an NHL player back. Here's Dakota Joshua. You like size, Bill Guerin? There's Dakota Joshua. Pick a player. Pick any player you want in that range that you're talking about. Maybe not Nils Höglander, but you ship out a player in that deal. You get Marco Rossi back. You've got some added cap space. You're going to have to sign Marco Rossi to a contract, but then you sign Suter. And I'm not even looking at Suter in the sense of, oh, you got to shore up the center ice position. I look at it and say, there's versatility there. There's a guy who can play in a top six. I know you were just talking about you don't want too many guys who could play on a second line, but like Pius Suter was part of what made that Miller-Besser line so good. And at their best, they had Pius Suter on the wing. So I look at it and say, like, the value that you get from Pius Suter, I don't know if you can go find that on the open market this offseason, whether that be the trade market or the free agent market.
Sure, but let's map that out. So they've got about $7 million right now. If you go out and you trade Marco Rossi, you sign him long term. But yeah, that's what I'm saying. So Rossi on a long-term deal is rumored to be looking around the Boldy 7x7 range as far as a contract.
Yep.
So, all right, your $7 million gone there. And then let's say a Höglander, for example, or Dakota Joshua opens up just over $3 million. That's not enough to re-sign Suter. So something else would have to give.
You trade Teddy Blue.
Yeah, I guess.
It's not hard. What I'm saying is it's not hard. It's not hard. Don't let anybody tell you it's hard. It's not hard.
Yeah. I still wouldn't, big picture, if I step back, it wouldn't be a terrible outcome. But if you look at Rossi, Suter, Evander Kane, they're all complementary guys. They're all complementary guys. Now, they're good complementary pieces to varying degrees, especially Suter and Rossi. But they fit best when they're not the best player on their line. And you just run the risk of not having enough like true top of the lineup drivers.
I think those three are a fine outcome. The home run, the absolute best outcome is not Rossi, it's JJ Peterka, right? Like there's a guy that can drive his own line that you'd like to acquire. Again, not a center, going to play wing, but there's a guy that you really, really like in JJ Peterka. And again, if you're signing Suter, you're right. Then it does fill that center need.
Also, let me ask you this question. If a scenario like that comes to fruition, where all right, they move out, let's say Höglander and Bluger,
Sure.
they're able to re-sign Suter and acquire Marco Rossi. So your overall inbound players are Rossi, Evander Kane, and keeping Pius Suter, right? You've lost Brock Besser in free agency. Suter you already had on the team last year, so it's not really a net gain. And you'd be losing, let's say, Höglander and Bluger. How much has your forward group actually improved on paper? I don't think
it's tell me the 3 players that they're getting again in your scenario.
So
Rossi or Peterka?
So okay, to simplify things, because Suter was already on the team last year, like let's not include him from the in and out equation.
Sure.
Let's just say like he was already on the team last year. Let's say they extend him. All right, he's still with them. You're talking about Besser out the door. As a free agent.
Who's not a driver. Let's also be clear about that.
He's not a driver. And
he's about to get paid like $8 million. But continue.
And then Höglander and Bluger, let's say, for hypothetical purposes. Okay. And inbound, you've got Evander Kane and Marco Rossi. Have you significantly improved? You're maybe slightly better. I don't think you've significantly improved because let's be very clear. I don't think the Canucks should sign Brock Besser to an $8 million kind of long-term extension, but there's no denying that he's a really good player. Even if he is a complimentary, doesn't drive play kind of guy, he gave you 25 goals in a down year. The year before he gave you 40 goals. Evander Kane is like a significant step down from Brock Besser as a player.
And
then Rossi is much better than Höglander and Bluger, but when you look at the total picture, you've maybe slightly improved, but I don't look at this as, whoa, this forward group is way better than it was this past season. And that's where this is, again, the larger take that I've kind of had in trying to map out the Canucks' future is that improvement is going to have to come internally. It's going to have to come from Elias Pettersson. It's going to have to come from, if Dakota Joshua returns, he's going to have to bounce back. Filipino's going to have to stay healthy and productive. Whatever they do over the remainder of the offseason, I don't think you're going to look at next season's forward group on paper and say, whoa, this forward group is way better than it was last season, because I just think there are too many limitations cap and assets wise. The scenario where they actually improve significantly results wise hinges on Elias Pettersson bouncing back. That's like by far the number one.
Always has. All offseason we're talking about. Yeah. So the one thing I'll say is you're right. I think on paper it's a slight improvement. Like I think Marco Rossi is better than Brock Besser. I know apples to oranges a little bit there, but like if it's Peterka, obviously it's not even a question. They've improved significantly. That's your big fish. That's a great acquisition. But if it's the players you talked about, where it's Rossi, it's Kane, and we're not talking about Suter, but if it's Rossi and it's Kane coming in, and you lose those 3 players in Besser, Höglander, Bluger, I think it's a slight upgrade. But I think one thing that we're forgetting to talk about, Harman, is the potential for contract year of Evander Kane, first season with a new team of Evander Kane, and that guy is really good. That guy is better than Brock Besser. And that's a big I know that's a big claim. Because Brock Besser brings a lot more defensively along the wall than Evander Kane ever will. I get that. But the simple fact of the matter is, like, Evander Kane could score 25 goals next year. He could score 30 goals next year. And again, you're getting this guy for a 4th round pick. I'm saying it's a slight upgrade now if he does what we expect him to do and score 20 goals, because I think that's a fair number to put on Evander Kane, is you're going to score 20 goals. If he excels beyond that, which I think he certainly has the potential to do, given those factors that I just talked about, then all of a sudden it's a bigger upgrade, I think.
I'm just not as bullish on Kane as I think you are.
That's
and
fair.
Not because I don't think he can't make an impact in your middle 6. I just have concerns about, again, his body holding up, the consistency of his effort level, the defensive side of the game. And I agree with you. I can see 20 to 25 goals, but that, like, I'm baking that in as the upside case. If that kind of makes sense. I don't think he's giving you more than 25 tops, Whereas, again, with Besser, he had 25 goals in a down year. I like the way you framed it, where it's okay. Rossi and Besser, even though they're different position, are probably roughly equivalent in terms of like top 6 impact, complementary guys. I actually like that better than comparing like framing. All right, Kane's a downgrade from Besser, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably the better way to look at it is, okay, like Rossi to Besser, roughly equivalent in terms of, all right, that's a complementary net front scoring top 6 guy in very different shapes and positions, obviously, but roughly comparable top 6 value. And then you're looking at then Höglander and Bluger potentially out, hypothetically, and then Evander Kane in. But then that's where we'll see, right? Like next season, for example, and I don't want to go too far down the hypothetical of assuming that Höglander ends up being the cap casualty. But if he is, it wouldn't surprise me if next season Nils Höglander, like there's a scenario where Nils Höglander could be as valuable as Evander Kane.
That's a good
especially because he's a play driver, how well he played down the stretch. And yeah, he's coming off a down year, but he himself, here comes the 24 goal take. Like he himself scored 20 goals before Höglander. So
all he did even strike that.
That's why I'm sort of looking at it overall, and even in that scenario you laid out, where again we're assuming here that they also land Rossi, which isn't a guarantee. Even then, I'm sort of looking at it on paper as it's probably close to a wash, maybe a slight upgrade. It's not like a huge improvement, and that's why internally you're going to have to rely on the guys you already have being a lot better, being a lot healthier as your means of improving, and that not only comes down to Pedersen, but Demco obviously as well in goal.
All right. Anything else you want to get in before we close it on anyone else?
No, that was it.
Okay. Let's get to our Bet365 bet of the day. Folks, remember to join us tomorrow. Subscribe to the Canucks Army YouTube channel. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts as well. Never miss an episode. Okay, tonight. Oh, we got a lot of new viewers. They don't understand why I'm doing a baseball bet. Oh, I can make bets on the NHL draft. Hang on a sec. Okay. Do you like... Who's the number 2 overall pick? You got Michael Misa at -300, Anton Frondell at +225, Caleb Denoyers at +2,000, and we're getting all over the place after that. Number 2 overall pick. Who do you like?
Well, Misa is the favorite, but there's been some smoke around. Could Frondell be a surprise number 2? I don't have intel on that. And also, I don't think I could say that publicly. I feel like that would be illegal if I had intel on who is likely to go higher, and I'm saying that publicly in relation to a betting segment. You know what? I've had that in the past where I knew a certain player was going to go. Like I'll just say I knew Luke Hughes was going to go to the Devils, and there was there were props, and obviously I didn't do anything, but that's a gray area. You can't.
Obviously, I texted all my friends.
No, I legitimately did not. That is illegal.
Good. That is illegal. We don't do that. Let's do a baseball bet. The Yankees.
I was like, you're asking me. I'm like,
The Yankees, the New York Yankees, are taking on the Cincinnati Reds tonight. Max Fried's on the bump for the Yankees. We're taking the over on strikeouts. You can get over 5.5 total strikeouts for Max Fried. Actually, that's a low. That was -155 odds. We're saying Max Fried gets 7 Ks tonight. The one that I did yesterday hit as well. Max Fried, 7 strikeouts against the Cincinnati Reds tonight, +135 odds. You can get that over at Bet365. Whatever your bet is, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Download the app and get on the game. Use the code NATION at Bet365. Must be 19 plus to play. If you choose to play, please play responsibly. All right, we'll wrap it up there. For my co-host, Harman Dial, and our technical producer, Jacob Lazar. Our thanks again to Talia Remchuk for joining the show today. We'll see you tomorrow, folks. My name is Dave Woodrelli. Thanks so much for the episode of Canucks Conversation. Canucks Conversation is live Monday through Friday, every weekday at 2 p.m. over on the Canucks Army YouTube channel. Make sure you like, subscribe, and interact in the YouTube live chat every day with us, folks.